She wasn't looking for anything new until two tiny faces in the pouring rain shattered her world with a single look. The rain came down in waves, relentless and cold, drenching everything it touched. Sarah gripped her grocery bags tighter as she hurried through the alley that cut behind her modest apartment building. She'd taken the shortcut 100 times, but today something felt different. She almost missed them. Two small shapes huddled against a dumpster, wrapped in what looked like a thin, soaked blanket. At first she thought they were stray dogs trembling in the corner, but then a tiny cough cut through the downpour, high-pitched and human. Sarah froze. She turned slowly, heart pounding. There, crouched together in the filth and shadows, were two little boys. Twins, identical, maybe 6 years old, maybe younger. Their eyes were wide, rimmed with red, and filled with something deeper than fear: exhaustion, defeat, abandonment. Their hair clung to their foreheads. Their clothes, if you could call them that, were no more than torn shirts, barely hanging on. No shoes, no coats, no explanation. For a moment the world fell away. There was only Sarah and them. "Hey, are you hurt?" she whispered, dropping to her knees despite the wet ground. The boys didn't answer. One simply leaned into the other, clutching his brother like he was the only thing keeping him alive. Sarah's heart twisted. She looked around. No parents. No note. No one running, shouting, searching. Just those eyes, wide and watchful, and silence that screamed louder than sirens. "I'm Sarah," she said gently. "You don't have to be afraid. I'm going to help you, okay?" Still no words. But one of the boys, his eyes just a little more alert, nodded slowly. That was enough. Without thinking, she dropped her groceries and shrugged off her coat. She wrapped it around both of them, scooping them up with arms that had once cradled her own baby. Long gone now, but never forgotten. The weight of the boys didn't slow her. Adrenaline surged as she carried them back to her apartment, pushing the door open with her foot and setting them gently on the couch. The heater was barely working, but it buzzed to life as she turned it up full blast. She grabbed towels, dry clothes, warm soup. The boys didn't speak, but they didn't resist either. One even let her wipe his feet and wrap them in fuzzy socks. They were strangers, broken little souls. But as Sarah sat on the floor beside them, watching their chests rise and fall in slow, cautious rhythm, she felt something shift inside her. A flicker of something she hadn't felt in years. Purpose. She didn't know where they came from or why they were alone. But she knew one thing with aching clarity. They had no home, no clothes, no hope. Until now. They didn't speak a word. But in the quiet, something unspoken bloomed between them, like the first warmth after a long winter. The next morning, Sarah woke up to a silence so still, it felt sacred. For a second, she thought she dreamt it all. The twins, the rain, the way they clung to each other like life preservers. But when she turned the corner into the small living room, there they were, still wrapped in her oversized coat, curled into the corners of the couch like two frightened kittens. One of them had kicked off a sock in the night. The other had a fist tightly clenched around the string of her hoodie. They were real, and they were still here. Sarah set about quietly making breakfast. Nothing fancy, just toast, eggs, and a bit of jam. But the smell of it stirred something. The younger twin peeked over the couch, blinking at the sunlight. The older one followed, more cautious but visibly curious. She placed the plates on the table and smiled. "I don't know what you like, but I figured this was a good start." They didn't respond, but the way they looked at the food, hesitant but hungry, made her heart ache. She didn't push. She simply sat, letting them come on their own terms. Minutes passed before they finally did. No words, just small footsteps, silent as whispers. They ate with slow, careful movements, as if afraid the food would vanish if they moved too fast. Sarah studied them gently, the way one twin always watched the other before taking a bite, the way they leaned into each other, even while sitting apart. Mirror images of pain, yet bound together by something even deeper. Love, pure and protective. "Do you have names?" she asked softly. No answer. But the younger one paused with his spoon halfway to his mouth, eyes flicking to the older boy like he was seeking permission. The older boy didn't speak either, but after a long pause, he gave the faintest nod. Okay, Sarah said, sensing the fragility in their silence. You don't have to tell me now, when you're ready. They didn't speak, but for the first time, the younger one gave her a look. Not a scared look, a curious one, a question forming behind wide eyes. Later that day, Sarah found them sitting on the floor, flipping through the pages of an old picture book. They couldn't have read the words, but they stared at the illustrations with the kind of focus only children have, one pointing at a picture of a puppy, the other silently smiling. By sunset, the younger one reached out, just once, and touched her sleeve. He didn't say anything, but in that brief tentative moment, Sarah knew a connection had started to form. Not because of anything she said, but because, for the first time in what must have felt like forever, they felt safe. She thought they were just lost children, until one word from a trembling mouth unraveled a truth more painful than she imagined. It had been 4 days since Sarah brought the twins home, and still not a single word. They followed her like shadows, quiet, observant, always clutching each other's hands. The younger one smiled more now, even giggled once when she accidentally spilled flour on her face while baking. The older boy, he watched everything, calculated, protective. But both of them avoided one thing: questions. Where are your parents? What's your name? What happened to you? She stopped asking after the second day. The answers weren't ready to be shared, and maybe they were too painful to say aloud, until the night the nightmare came. It was around 2 a.m. when Sarah heard the scream. Sharp, panicked, raw. She leapt from bed, heart racing, and burst into the living room, where the boys had been sleeping under a pile of blankets. The older twin was sitting upright, eyes wide, chest heaving. His arms were wrapped around his brother, who was sobbing uncontrollably, his tiny hands grasping at something invisible. Hey, hey, it's okay. It's okay, baby. You're safe, Sarah said, kneeling beside them. The younger boy clung to her, burying his face into her chest as if trying to escape whatever horror he had just relived. She held them both, rocking gently, humming the lullaby she used to sing for her daughter years ago, the one that still lingered in her bones. And then, a whisper, so faint she almost missed it. Car, fire. She froze. She pulled back slightly and looked into the older boy's face. He wasn't crying. His voice was steady, but his eyes were broken. Say that again? She asked gently. Car, fire. Mama didn't wake up. The words hit like a blow. Sarah's breath caught. Her arms tightened around both boys. Was it an accident? She asked. The boy didn't answer, but slowly shook his head. A chill ran through her. Did someone do it? He nodded. Once. Tears slipped down Sarah's cheeks. Not just for them. For what they had seen, what they had endured, what no child should ever carry. She pressed her lips to their foreheads, her voice barely holding together. You're safe now, I promise. No one will ever hurt you again. The younger boy sniffled, his hand still fisting the fabric of her shirt. The older one closed his eyes, exhaling as if he had just unloaded a mountain off his chest. And in that fragile hour before dawn, Sarah finally understood the weight these boys carried. They weren't just abandoned, they were survivors. And whatever miracle was coming, it had already begun the moment they trusted her enough to speak. Just when peace seemed possible, a knock on the door threatened to take everything and everyone away. The days that followed were different. The boys had begun to speak, not much but enough to paint a clearer picture. Their names were Liam and Noah, 6 years old. Their mother, gone. The fire hadn't been an accident. They didn't know who had done it, only that someone had followed them ever since. Sarah tried to hide her tears when they told her that, tried to act strong, calm, collected. But at night, when the boys were asleep, she paced, checked the locks twice, pulled the curtains tight. Her world had once revolved around safety, routine. Now it spun on anxiety and instinct. Still, they smiled more now. They laughed at cartoons, helped stir pancake batter. Liam, the older one, even drew pictures again. mostly of houses with flowers and clouds and, surprisingly, her. Always her. And then came the knock. It was a late afternoon. The sun dipped behind clouds and the air was thick with the stillness that comes before a storm. Sarah was folding laundry when she heard it. 3 slow knocks. She peeked through the peephole. A man in a dark coat stood on the porch, holding something in his hand. A file, maybe. "Can I help you?" she called through the door. The man lifted a badge. "Mrs. Sarah Collins, I'm from Child Protective Services. We've received a report. I need to speak with you about the children in your care." Her heart stopped. Report? Liam and Noah were peeking out from behind the hallway, sensing her shift in energy. "I think there's been a mistake," she said, forcing calm. "They're just—" The man cut in gently. "We've been trying to locate these twins for over a week. Their mother is presumed deceased, and the boys have no legal guardian. If you've taken them in, that's commendable, but the law requires proper protocol." Panic slammed into her chest. "Are you saying you're taking them away?" "I'm saying they need to be placed in temporary foster care while we investigate, for their own safety." Liam's hand slipped into Noah's. Both looked like they were about to cry. "No," Sarah whispered. "You don't understand. They've finally started to heal. They've started to feel like they belong." "I understand that this is hard," the man replied, lowering his voice. "But if you truly care about them, you'll do what's right." She stood frozen as he handed her a paper and walked away. The door shut. The silence in the room was louder than any scream. Sarah turned to the boys. Their eyes were pleading. "I'm not letting anyone take you," she said, voice trembling but fierce. "I don't care what it takes." And just like that, peace was shattered. But Sarah wasn't the same woman she had been weeks ago. And now she had something, someone, worth fighting for. She promised to fight for them. But what if love alone wasn't enough to save them from the world outside her door? The letter from CPS sat on her kitchen table like a ticking bomb. Sarah stared at it for hours after the agent left. She didn't even hear the boys when they crept into the room and wrapped their arms around her legs. Her hands trembled as she picked up the paper again. It was official. The boys would be evaluated by the state. Social workers would decide where they belonged. And unless Sarah could prove legal guardianship, something she didn't have, she had no right to keep them. No right, even after nursing them back to sleep from their nightmares. No right, even after she learned how Noah liked extra syrup on his pancakes and Liam couldn't fall asleep unless the closet light was on. No right, even though they'd started calling her Mama when they thought she wasn't listening. She sat on the edge of her bed that night, the boys asleep on the couch again, and let the silence pour in like water. Who was she kidding? She wasn't married, barely making ends meet. She didn't even own her apartment. She was behind on rent. How could she possibly convince the state she was fit to raise 2 traumatized children? The fear crawled in like a shadow and wrapped around her chest. What if she failed them? What if trying to fight the system only made it worse? What if they were taken away anyway? And this time, there'd be no one to wrap them in a warm coat, to sit by them at night, to tell them they were safe. She pressed a fist to her lips to muffle a sob. She had survived heartbreak before. The loss of her daughter had nearly shattered her. She'd sworn she would never open her heart again, never allow herself to be that vulnerable. But then came Liam and Noah, silent and broken and watching the world with eyes too old for their tiny faces. And now she loved them. That's what terrified her the most, because love wasn't always enough. The next morning, she walked into the kitchen to find Liam at the table, holding one of her old family photos, the one of her with her daughter, the only one she kept framed. He looked up with soft, knowing eyes. "Is she your little girl?" he asked. Sarah froze. "You never talked about her," he added, "but she's in your smile." Her knees nearly buckled. She nodded. "Her name was Emily. She would have been 7. Liam reached out and took her hand, not as a child needing comfort, but as someone offering it. Sarah knelt beside him and whispered, "I don't know if I can keep you. I'm trying, but the world doesn't always care how much we love someone." Liam squeezed her fingers. "Then we'll try together." And for the first time in days, she exhaled. Not because the fear was gone, but because she wasn't carrying it alone anymore. Just when the light had almost vanished, a single act of kindness sparked the flame again, and it came from where she least expected it. The air outside was crisp, the kind of cold that hinted at snow, but hadn't yet decided to fall. Sarah walked the boys to the corner store, not because they needed groceries, but because the walls of her apartment had started to feel too tight, too heavy with fear. Liam and Noah walked close, their little hands snug in hers. Neither of them spoke much, but Sarah could feel their unease mirroring her own. Every siren in the distance made Liam's grip tighten. Every stranger's glance made Noah edge closer. She felt like she was running out of time. They were halfway down the block when they heard a voice. "Sarah?" She turned. It was Mrs. Henderson, her upstairs neighbor, the older woman with the tightly curled gray hair who had once complained about kids making noise past bedtime and rarely smiled at anyone. Sarah braced herself for another lecture, but instead Mrs. Henderson stepped forward, eyes softer than Sarah had ever seen them. "I heard about the visit," she said quietly. "From CPS." Sarah's throat tightened. "I'm doing my best. I didn't know what else to do." Mrs. Henderson reached into her purse and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "I used to be a foster parent," she said. "Years ago. Still licensed, technically. I called a friend. She works at the agency. Told her what kind of woman you are." Sarah blinked. "What? What did you say?" "I told her you're the only person in this building who checked on me during the heat wave last summer. I told her about how you brought food when my son passed. And I told her if anyone deserves to be those boys' guardian, it's you." Sarah's hands trembled as she unfolded the paper. It was a contact name, a lawyer, and a note. "Willing to help pro bono. Call today." "You don't have to fight this alone," Mrs. Henderson added, voice quiet. "You just needed someone to remind you you're not invisible." Tears filled Sarah's eyes before she could stop them. "Thank you," she whispered. "Don't thank me yet. Just go win." That night, Sarah sat with the boys and told them about the lawyer, about how there might still be a way to stay together, about how sometimes, even when the world feels against you, someone steps forward. Noah threw his arms around her neck. Liam said just 3 words. "We believe you." And in that small, dim apartment, the heaviness began to lift. Not because the storm had passed, but because now they had shelter from it. Hope hadn't died. It had simply been waiting for the right moment to return. Some promises are whispered in quiet moments, but they echo louder than anything the world can throw at you. The living room was warm with the golden glow of late afternoon light. A fresh batch of chocolate chip cookies cooled on the counter, Noah's favorite. Liam was curled up on the couch, drawing again, this time sketching a picture of their little family. Sarah, herself, and Noah, all holding hands beneath a big sun. Sarah sat down slowly beside him. "I talked to the lawyer today," she said gently. Liam looked up, eyes steady. "She's filing an emergency petition. If all goes well, I'll be named your temporary guardian until the full hearing." He blinked. "What happens after?" Sarah hesitated. "We fight for forever." Noah padded into the room, holding the drawing he'd secretly copied from Liam's. His version was scribbled and messy, but right at the top, in crooked letters, were the words, "Our family." Sarah took a deep breath. This was the moment. "Boys," she said softly, "can I tell you something important?" They both nodded, climbing into her lap like it was the most natural thing in the world. She wrapped an arm around each of them. "I don't know what the judge will say. I don't know how long it'll take, and I can't promise things will always be easy." Noah's bottom lip trembled, but he didn't interrupt. "But I promise this. I will never stop fighting for you. Not ever. I will be here when you wake up. I will be here when you're scared. I will be here when things don't make sense. I will be here because you're mine now." The room was silent for a heartbeat. Then Liam's voice broke the stillness. "No one ever promised us anything before." Sarah felt her chest tighten, but she nodded. "Well, get used to it, because I've got a whole list of promises for you, starting with pancakes tomorrow morning." With whipped cream, Noah giggled. wiping his nose on her shoulder. Can we make a promise too? She smiled. Of course. Liam looked her straight in the eyes. We'll try not to be afraid anymore, and we'll stay with you. Forever. Sarah couldn't speak. She just held them tighter. Later that night, after they'd fallen asleep wrapped in the same blanket, Sarah sat beside their tiny sleeping forms and wrote a letter. Not to the judge, not to CPS, to herself. It began with the words, "This is the family I didn't know I was waiting for," and ended with, "And I will love them even if the world doesn't let me keep them." But deep down, in the quiet corners of her heart, she believed that this time, the world just might. Because some promises were powerful enough to bend fate. Let me know when you're ready for part 8. Unexpected joy. A moment is coming that neither Sarah nor the boys could have dreamed of. She expected another ordinary day. Not the laughter, the light, or the miracle that would catch her completely off guard. The morning sun spilled through the curtains, bright and gentle. Sarah yawned as she flipped pancakes, humming softly. The boys were still asleep, and for the first time in weeks she wasn't waking up in fear. There was still so much unknown. Court dates, paperwork, background checks. But somehow her home felt lighter. Like the shadows that had lingered for too long were beginning to clear. She turned off the stove and called down the hallway. "Boys, breakfast!" But instead of the usual groggy shuffle of feet, there was silence. She walked over, concerned. Then suddenly, pop! A balloon burst from behind the couch. "Surprise!" Noah leaped out, laughing wildly, followed by Liam holding a crumpled construction paper card and 3 store-bought cupcakes. Sarah froze, completely caught off guard. "What is this?" she asked, blinking. "It's your birthday!" Noah shouted, arms stretched wide. Sarah burst out laughing. "My birthday's not until October." Liam stepped forward with his signature, serious face. "We know, but we didn't know you then. So, this is your makeup birthday, your first one, with us." Her hand went to her mouth. She knelt as Noah jumped into her arms. "We picked the cupcakes at the gas station," he said proudly, and Liam used all the blue marker ink making the card. Sarah took the paper from Liam. On it were 2 stick figure boys and 1 tall woman. The words read, "Happy New Birthday, Mama," with a sun, 3 hearts, and a lopsided smiley face. Her heart swelled. This wasn't just joy. This was healing. She hugged them both, tears running down her cheeks, but her smile wide and unstoppable. "I've never had a birthday like this," she whispered. "Not even on my real birthday." "Then we'll do it every year," Liam promised, voice unwavering. "From now on." Noah nodded. "Yeah, we'll even learn how to bake next time. Not just microwave." They spent the rest of the morning dancing in the living room, eating cupcakes for breakfast, and singing off-key to the radio. For a little while, there were no court papers, no visits from social workers, no shadows hanging over their heads. Just the 3 of them, a team, a family. Later that evening, Sarah tucked the card into a shoebox full of special memories, old photos of her daughter, letters she had never mailed, and now, this. Proof that even the most unexpected love can bloom in the middle of brokenness. She looked at the boys sleeping in the glow of a nightlight and whispered, "You didn't just bring joy into my life. You reminded me how to feel it." And somewhere deep in her heart, a new dream quietly took shape. They hadn't come into her life to be rescued. They came to rescue her too. When everything they'd built was put on trial, love, patience, and trust would face their hardest test yet. The court summons came 2 weeks later. Sarah sat at the kitchen table, the unopened envelope heavy in her hands. She already knew what it said. The custody hearing had been scheduled. The final decision would be made. It should have felt like a step forward, but all she felt was the slow tightening of fear around her ribs. Across the room, Liam was helping Noah with a puzzle, their heads bowed together in deep concentration. They didn't know about the envelope. Not yet. She wasn't ready to tell them. The days that followed were long and filled with waiting. Social workers came for interviews. A court-appointed psychologist visited the home. Questions were asked. Polite, clinical, distant questions that tried to turn love into checkboxes. Do the boys have a stable environment? Are you financially secure? Do you understand the emotional demands of raising trauma-affected children? Sarah answered as best as she could. But inside, she kept asking her own question. Will they see what we've built here, or just what we're missing? One night after the boys were asleep, Sarah sat on the floor of her bedroom, knees hugged to her chest. She hadn't cried in days, but now the tears came, slow and tired. She had given everything, her time, her savings, her heart, and it still might not be enough. She'd lost a child once. She didn't know if she could survive it again. Then came a soft knock. Liam. I heard you, he said quietly. Are you okay? Sarah quickly wiped her face. Yes, sweetheart. Just tired. He hesitated in the doorway. If the judge says we can't stay, will you forget us? She felt like someone had driven a knife straight through her. Never, she said, crawling over to him. You hear me? Never. He nodded, biting his lip. Me neither. She pulled him into a hug, her tears falling into his hair. The morning of the hearing came like thunder. They dressed in their best clothes. Sarah in a plain blue dress she hadn't worn since her last job interview. The boys in button-down shirts and jeans, their small hands holding tightly onto hers as they walked into the courthouse. Inside, everything felt too big, too cold. The judge listened. The social worker spoke. The CPS representative argued the case with protocol, with forms, with all the logical reasons why the boys might be better placed elsewhere. Sarah stood and spoke last, not with a polished speech, but with truth. I may not have much, she said, but I have never turned these boys away. I found them broken. They found me empty, and together we've made something whole. I'm not asking you to see a perfect family. I'm asking you to see a real one. When she sat down, the silence was sharp. The judge leaned forward. This court will reconvene tomorrow for final decision. And with that, time stood still. Now all they could do was wait. The waiting felt like an eternity. But when the moment came, it changed everything with just a few quiet words. The next morning dawned gray and quiet. Rain pattered softly against the windows as Sarah helped Liam and Noah into their jackets. The courthouse loomed like a shadow waiting to swallow them whole. None of them spoke much on the ride there. What was there to say? This was the moment that would decide their future, together or apart. Sarah's fingers shook as she signed in at the clerk's desk. Liam squeezed her hand. Noah didn't let go of her arm the entire walk to the courtroom. Inside, everything looked the same as the day before. The same judge, the same cold lighting, the same endless folders of paperwork. But today, the judge's tone was different. I've reviewed all the material, he said calmly. I've spoken with both the social worker and the psychologist. I've read the letters submitted in support of Ms. Collins' petition. Sarah held her breath. The boy's progress since arriving in her care is remarkable. And while she may not meet every technical ideal, love is not measurable by paperwork. Liam's hand squeezed tighter. The judge looked directly at Sarah. Ms. Collins, I hereby grant you temporary full custody of Liam and Noah with a path toward permanent adoption pending standard procedures, effective immediately. Noah blinked up at her. What? What did he say? Sarah smiled, stunned, breathless, overwhelmed, and knelt between them. He said we're a family. Liam didn't say a word. He simply wrapped his arms around her neck and didn't let go. Noah's small hands grabbed both of them, laughing through tears. They walked out of the courthouse into the rain, and for once, none of them cared that they were getting soaked. Sarah tilted her head to the sky, laughing freely. It wasn't the end of the storm, but it was the start of something new. That afternoon, she let the boys pick out one special thing from the corner store. Liam chose a blank sketch pad. Noah picked a wind-up toy robot that made whirring noises and flashed lights. Can we celebrate every year? Noah asked. Like this is our real birthday? Sarah nodded. Yes, the day our family was born. That night, she tucked them into bed. Not as a stranger who took them in, but as a mother. A real one. One who had earned it, fought for it, and would never let it go. She sat at the edge of her bed afterward, writing in her journal, "A new chapter begins. We were 3 people with broken pieces. Now we're one heart with 3 names." And in the stillness of her room, Sarah smiled. Not with relief, but with joy. Because beginnings don't always come when you expect them. Sometimes they arrive in the rain. Sometimes they come as twins with no home, no clothes, and no hope, and end with a miracle you didn't even know you needed. She finally had everything she fought for, and then came the call that forced her to choose between her safety and their future. A month had passed since the courtroom miracle, and life had settled into something that almost resembled peace. Sarah was working nights at the diner again, saving every dollar she could. The boys had started school. Every morning was packed lunches, tangled shoelaces, and quick goodbye hugs at the bus stop. It was exhausting. It was beautiful. And then the phone rang. She didn't recognize the number, but something in her gut told her to answer it. Ms. Collins? The voice on the other end was low, official. This is Officer Ramirez from the state police. We have an update related to the case involving the twins' mother's death. Sarah's stomach dropped. I thought that case went cold, she said slowly. We reopened it, and we've located a suspect. Sarah listened in stunned silence as the officer explained. A man tied to a criminal network. Dangerous. The same man who had been seen near the apartment the day after the fire. He had disappeared until last week, and now he was back in town. There's reason to believe he may try to make contact, the officer added. With the boys. Sarah's grip on the phone tightened. You're saying they're not safe. I'm saying we're putting a protection watch in place, but if you want to voluntarily place them in state-supervised care? No. Her answer was immediate, sharp. Ms. Collins, I understand this is emotional, but we're dealing with a threat. I said no. She hung up before her voice could break. That night, she didn't sleep. She checked the locks 3 times, pulled the boys into her room, letting them sleep beside her under the same blanket. By morning, she had made a decision. She drove the boys to school, but instead of heading to work, she went straight to her lawyer's office. If anything happens to me, she told her softly, I want it in writing that the boys go to Mrs. Henderson upstairs. She's already certified. She knows them. The lawyer frowned. Are you expecting something to happen? I'm preparing. I can't take chances with their lives. It was the hardest paper she ever signed, because it meant facing the possibility of being torn away from them. But Sarah had made a promise. She'd protect them, even if it meant letting them go. That night, she sat the boys down. She didn't tell them everything, just that someone from their past might try to find them, and they needed to be careful. We're not scared, Liam said. You're our mom now, Noah added, and moms don't lose. Sarah smiled, even as her heart broke quietly inside, because sometimes love means standing in front of the storm alone, not so it passes, but so the ones behind you never feel its full weight. Some stories don't end with a single moment. They resolve like music, every note falling into place until peace takes its final breath. It didn't happen all at once. The danger passed slowly and quietly. The man from the fire was caught during a sting operation 2 towns over. Sarah found out through a voicemail. Officer Ramirez left a short, clipped message. The suspect is in custody. The boys are no longer considered at risk. Just like that, the shadow lifted. But even as the fear left, the weight didn't. Not right away, not from her bones, not from the boys' hearts. Trauma never really says goodbye. It just learns to sleep quietly inside the places you've learned to heal. Months passed. Court appearances turned into final approvals. Sarah's guardianship became permanent. The papers were signed. The ink dried. She was their mother. Not just in feeling, not just in heart, but in law, in blood, in truth. Liam and Noah grew fast. Liam joined the school art club. Noah became obsessed with fixing broken things. Toys, old radios, the toaster. Like every screw he tightened, made the world a little more whole. On the 1-year anniversary of the day they'd met, Sarah brought home a small white cake and 3 candles. They sat on the floor in their pajamas and blew them out together. All 3. No wishes spoken aloud, because for once they didn't need to. Later that night, Sarah pulled out the shoebox where she kept her sacred things. Emily's last drawing. The letter she wrote to herself the night she thought she'd lose the boys. And now 2 new treasures. A Mother's Day card in Liam's careful handwriting, and a napkin with crayon hearts drawn by Noah, folded neatly like it was priceless. She sat in the quiet and listened to the house, the sound of children breathing behind bedroom doors, the hum of a refrigerator that still worked, most days, and the small, ordinary creaks of a home that had finally settled into itself. This was it. Not a perfect life, but a full one. The story hadn't been about rescue after all. Not hers, not theirs. It had been about choosing each other, every day, in every way, no matter what tried to tear them apart. Sarah leaned back in her chair and let the moment hold her. A symphony of love, grief, fear, and courage had played through every chapter. And now at last, every note was resolved, not with noise, but with peace. And in that harmony, a miracle lived quietly and completely in the hearts of a mother and her sons.